sometimes, but very rarely, we come to a moment when we can recognize ourselves and take heart from it. We have looked to, and we are the inheritors of, the martial values of ancient times: Roman law, Athenian democracy, and the spiritual striving of Jerusalem. The words "we" and "our" and "us" are monumentally important. In Pericles' great speech to the Athenian people, giving the reasons why their country was great and why it must remain so, you can take that speech and you can circle the words that appear most frequently. The words "we" and "our" and "us." The example Pericles gives in that speech is that we never leave a fellow soldier behind. That is who we are and why we are great. The example was made shockingly vivid when Thucydides tells us about the end of the Peloponnesian War, when the Athenian army in Sicily did leave its fellow soldiers behind. And that marked the end of Athens' power and greatness. In our way of war, those who are captured and imprisoned and suffer at the hands of the enemy know that every effort will be made to reunite them with us. Without them, we would not be us. And we know they will draw upon their own moral and intellectual and spiritual resources to do all that they can do to endure their captivity. I knew James Bond Stockdale, the pilot of a U.S. Navy A-4, who was hit in a flak trap over North Vietnam. He was held in a communist prison for 8 years, tortured 15 times, kept in leg irons for 2 years, and in solitary confinement for 4 years. Jim Stockdale knew that his country would not leave him there, and he had his own inner strength. He had studied the Roman philosopher Epictetus, who taught that there can be no such thing as being the victim of another. You can only be a victim of yourself. But we need, and we have, more than the antique virtues of classical Greece and Rome. The modern age starts with the Renaissance, which rediscovered and studied anew the classics. They did more. They looked farther back in time. Michelangelo's great statue of 1501 of David, as he stands before Goliath. David has declined to wear armor. He stands unclothed before the giant power. He does not carry the expected sword and shield, only a slingshot in his hand. Why is this statue so significant? David is not, as were other depictions of this encounter, sculpted in triumph. No. He is shown just before the moment when he must act. This is the moment when he does not yet know what he will do. The essence of the work is David's gaze, the expression on his face. He is looking not at Goliath, but at the abstract idea of the divine spirit. It is a moment caught in marble that transcends the representational image. It is that instant of the mind and spirit, not the material being, that matters and has meaning. That is the recognition that we share. That makes us who we are. Who are we? Israel and America together. So it is fitting that we have come together in this moment of recognition here at Yale, whose founders well understood this and registered that understanding in the words of Yale's seal: light and truth, lux et veritas, reason and revelation, rem vetim. We now turn to Rabbi Shmuel Hecht of the Jewish Society at Yale.
Thank you, Professor Hill. I speak today about the power of the individual. This past week, the Jewish people celebrated the culmination of festivals marking a new year, and in doing so began a new cycle of reading the book of Genesis. In this spirit, we also read chapter 42 of Isaiah in synagogues around the world, and I quote the Holy Prophet. So said the Lord, who creates the heavens and stretches them forth, spreads out the earth and what grows from it, gives a soul to the people upon it, and a spirit to those who walk on it. I am the Lord, in righteousness have I called you, and taken hold of your hand. I have protected you and appointed you to bring the people to the covenant, to be a light for the nations of the world. To open blinded eyes, to remove a prisoner from confinement, dwellers in darkness from a dungeon. Close quote. This ideal was reiterated many centuries later in the great writings of the 2nd century Mishnah, when the rabbis posed the famous question, why in Genesis, when God created all the species of the universe, did he create them in mass? And yet when he creates mankind, he created one man and one woman. And the answer given by the rabbis is to teach us that all of humanity starts from one. And so when one saves the life of an individual, one has saved the entire world. And in our modern era, the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, continued to inspire the world with this ideal. He was once introduced to an Israeli soldier who sadly lost both his legs in a mine explosion in a war with Syria. Naturally, there was nothing that could console this young man for the great sacrifice he made to protect his people. No tears, no cries, no letters, no words could compensate for what he had lost. As he rolled up in his wheelchair to engage in conversation, the Rebbe walked over to this man, looked him in the eyes, shook his hand firmly, and simply said, "Thank you." Today I turn to you, my fellow brothers, our visitors, doctor, commander, soldiers, and of course to you, Gilad Shalit, and on behalf of the entire Jewish people, all of mankind who seek true peace, and I say to you from our hearts and our souls, thank you. It is my honor to introduce a special guest of the great ally of the United States, the State of Israel, Director of the Foreign Ministry for Diplomacy, Gidon Meir.